After these many months connected to each other primarily through our screens, there are few people in the world better positioned to help us make sense of what we have lost and gained than Sherry Turkle. She is the founding director of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology's Initiative on Technology and Self, and her new book is timely. It's called The Empathy Diaries, a Memoir, and it brings Sherry Turkle back to our virtual studio from Provincetown, Massachusetts in Cape Cod. It's great to see you again. You were on this program I guess about 5, 6 years ago, and we're so
Yes,
glad you could make some time for us again this time. How you doing?
I'm delighted. I'm well. I'm delighted to be here.
Glad to hear it. We're going to start with an excerpt from your most recent book. It's part of a letter that you wrote to your estranged father in 1979, and here it goes. Dear Mr. Zimmerman, I am Sherry Turkle, the daughter of Harriet Bonowitz and Charles Zimmerman, born on June 18, 1948. I was adopted by Milton Turkle, my mother's second husband, and thus carry his name. I have reason to believe that you are my father. I have not been in contact with my father for many years. If you are my father, I would like to meet with you and renew our acquaintance. Please be in touch in whatever way you find most comfortable. Thank you, sincerely, Sherry Turkle. Wow. I mean, needless to say, not many of us get to write a letter like that at some point in our lives. So let's dive into this. At what point in your life were you estranged from your father?
Oh, very early. As I later learned, my mother left my father when I was 1 year old, and I didn't know the reason until I was 30 years old. But she left him for mysterious reasons uh, and moved in with her mother and unmarried sister in a one-bedroom flat in Brooklyn, and I slept between my grandparents, and my aunt and my mother shared a pull-out couch in the living room. And I wasn't allowed to say my father's name. We never spoke of him. When my mother remarried, I wasn't allowed to mention that she had been divorced. It was a family secret. I used the name Sherry Turkle, even though my name was Sherry Zimmerman. So I carried this family secret. Under no circumstances did my mother want anyone to know about this early first marriage. So
How
that's
did,
kind of the secret of the book, is when will I seek my father out and what will his identity be? And why did my mother not want anyone to know?
can you just give us a bit more detail on how you, presumably as a child, found out that the raising of your biological father was a complete no-go zone?
Well, I was in a family called Bonowitz, but I knew that I had another father. I mean, I knew I had a father and that none of these people were it. And I found a book deep buried away in a closet. And the book said Sherry Zimmerman. And I had that moment of, even as I think I was 3 years old, I had that moment of kind of, when you know something, but you don't know how you know something. And I said, that's me. I am Sherry Zimmerman. And I knew not to say to anyone that I had found this book because I knew this was taboo knowledge. And whenever I would try to come, then I found a picture of a man and his face was rubbed out. And I knew that was my father. And I knew to hide that picture in deepest recesses of the closet. So I knew there was something about me. I grew up with this sense of being deeply ashamed and marginal and not right. My name was a secret. I was a secret. Um, and I called the book The Empathy Diaries because really I had to find a way to have empathy towards these people who loved me, but were putting me through this need to lie and not be who I was. And that has been a lifelong journey. And that the
We
book
will
talks about that.
we will certainly pursue that issue of empathy more as we continue our conversation. But um, I do want to, I'm in a weird spot here because I don't want to give away too much of the plot of the
I don't,
book.
it's okay. It's not a I mean, it's not a no, it's not a mystery. The book has a mystery. I'm happy to give away the mystery. You need not fuss.
Okay. But having said that, I mean, you eventually did meet him. You met him more than 40
Yeah,
years
I
ago,
met
and I
him.
think we got to
Let's
know more
let's
about how that meeting
let's
went.
let's tell.
Okay.
It turns out that the arc of the book really is that I'm angry at my mother all my life and estranged from her because she keeps me from this man who I fantasize, this father who I fantasize must be something. And she dies before we ever have a conversation about him. And I, 10 years after her death, I determined that I am going to find him. I hire a detective. There's no Google. And I find him. I spent all my MIT salary for the first 2 years with this detective, finding him. And it turns out that he is a rogue scientist. He thinks he's disproved Einstein, and he explains to me that when I was a baby, he thought he was like a great psychologist, like Skinner, a great scientist, and he did experiments on me. He would hide me in a closet and not talk to me. He would put me face to face with him and not talk to me. He would see how long I would go if he deprived me of this or he gave me that. I mean, he did all these Skinnerian behavioral experiments on me in secret, because he must have known what my loving Jewish mother would think if she found him doing these experiments for science. And when my mother finally found him doing this, she didn't say a word except, "I'm taking her, I'm leaving." And she packed up some A&P garbage, not garbage, some A&P boxes. She called her sister who had a car, and she left to go back to live with her parents, and she divorced him. And what's really funny when he finally tells me the story, when I find him with this detective, is he's so clueless still about what he did, is he says to me, and this was really moving as I tried to understand this man who was my father. He says, "I didn't understand her because I offered her co-authorship in the papers that I was going to write about these brilliant experiments I was doing. Even though she didn't have a master's, she didn't have anything, I was going to let her be a co-author." He was so completely out of it. He didn't understand why my mother was leaving him. And that was Dad. So in finding him, I lost the father I had dreamed of all these years. But actually, I found my mother and reconciled with her and had empathy for her and understood how frightened she had been. And she fled him to save me. And after her death, I understood all that and reconciled with her and really found myself and began the journey of finding my identity.
Well, here's a line in the book. "My parents gave me burdens in childhood that I honed as gifts." Do you now know how you managed, even as a child, to take those burdens and somehow turn them into gifts?
Yes, I mean, I guess I've been a little bit downbeat in talking about. I mean, I'm trying to say that. I guess I was trying to say that that I think it's important to have conversations with your children when you can, if you can. That there's a message in my book about not talking to your children. That there's a price to pay and better to speak. I mean, I have a daughter, and she will say too much information, Mommy, because I'm so committed to, it's better to speak even about difficult things. But when I say that I had burdens that I honed into gifts, it's that by holding a secret and by knowing that everything was not as the surface looked like, I realized that life is like that. When you go into any situation, the apparent Brooklyn normal that my family looked like was only the surface of things. And I was the secret that was the truth. And that sensibility that there is an underlying truth that the normal hides, that is a sociologist in the making. That is a psychologist in the making.
Well, let's pick up on that a little bit. And in doing so, we're going to bounce around in terms of time here, because I want to take you back to 1968 when your grandfather sent you to Paris.
Yes.
And what did you learn in Paris that you now know would have been extremely helpful to the kind of work you ended up in?
Well, in Paris, I was in Paris in a very, very special time. Um, there was a social revolution. Young people were saying, where we want to change the rules. They closed the university. They had a general strike. French society was very structured. Everybody knew how everything was going to work. It was kind of parallel to the 60s in the United States when, everything seemed up for grabs. And I was studying anthropologists who talked about times like that. They're called liminal times, times betwixt and between. And I really, in France, I mean, everything was closed. Everything was really, you sensed that a new world was starting. And I learned that in times like that, you can really rethink very fundamental things about your society. And more than that, you can see your society in a new way. And I think that when I came back to the United States after that period in the 60s, I saw things about life at Harvard, which I was coming back to, that I hadn't seen before. For example, that there were no women on the faculty. None. Because it had seemed normal to me before. And then that kind of taking yourself out and being in this betwixt and between world, and then you come back and you say, hold on, I see this fresh. I see this anew. Why aren't there any women on the faculty? Why am I not allowed to go into Lamont Library where all the men study? Why am I studying in the basement of Memorial Church? That had seemed completely natural to me. And I think that one of the virtues of the Empathy Diaries is that I really was able to put myself back, and I worked really hard to put myself back into the frame of mind I was in at each point of the book. And I talk about being on the college board of Saks Fifth Avenue in the late 60s and selling trousseaux to girls going away to sister schools. And I really put myself back into a state of mind when girls went away to college with full trousseaux to wear to all the coming out parties at Ivy League schools. And I put myself back into being a freshman at Radcliffe and everybody being dressed to be a freshman at Radcliffe instead of just wearing blue jeans to class. And all of a sudden, after France, I could see, wait a second, why are there no women? Why is it just assumed that the president of every organization is a man? I mean, all of that came out of the French experience where everything was up for grabs. And I really make the analogy between the time we're living now, where I think that having gone through this experience of COVID, where we've seen our society anew, a lot of things are up for grabs. How we work, how we live, the role of marginalized people, how our healthcare will be, how we'll relate to the environment. I had an experience in France of a time that was genuinely betwixt and between. And it made a profound impression on me. Also, I worked as a cleaning lady, and I was called Le Portugaise because they didn't even want to know my name. I was just named by the type of person, which was Portuguese, who usually did that job. Hmm. And that made a profound impression on me, to not even have a name in your job.
I do want to hit on some of those issues that you just brought up, but before we do that, I'm not ready to let you leave Cambridge, Massachusetts yet, because we want to go to 1976. You're not at Harvard anymore. You're at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology now, and you basically have a front seat on this digital revolution that is going to come.
Yes.
And the engineers at MIT are so excited about the fact that Steve Jobs is going to bring the Apple II and show everybody the future, and your colleagues are going gaga. And you had a somewhat different reaction. What was your reaction?
Yes. Well, what was really so Steve Jobs has invented the Apple II, and I feel a deep affinity for Steve Jobs because I'm studying. My insight when I got to MIT was that the computer was not a tool. Everybody was saying the computer is a tool, it's a tool. And I said, no, it's also an intimate machine. It's a second self. It's a projection of who we are. Because I was interviewing people who were saying, when you program a computer, you put a piece of your mind into the computer's mind and you come to see yourself differently, and my identity feels different. I mean, this was not just a tool. And that was Steve Jobs' insight, that this machine was going to change how we thought. It wasn't just a tool. So when Steve Jobs was coming, I was all excited, and I wasn't invited to the meetings that he was at. I was asked to make him dinner, and I was told to make him a vegetarian dinner.
Which you didn't eat anyway.
Which he was, because he was vegetarian. So I make him a vegetarian dinner, and he comes in, he looks at my pathetic vegetarian dinner. He says, it's not my kind of vegetarian. And he leaves because apparently he was not that kind of vegetarian. He was a fruitarian, and who knew that he was not? I mean, I wasn't fully informed about his vegetarianism. But what's really interesting, again, is that I was a real professor at MIT. I wasn't like a research assistant or an adjunct. I mean, I was really full professor. And I was not invited. Nobody thought, even though I was like onto his thing, to invite me to the meetings, but just to make him dinner. And the truth of it is that if you read the book and you get to that section, I don't comment on that. And the reason I don't comment on that is because I was so into my state of mind in writing the book of the time that at the time, I was so used to being treated as a second-class citizen at MIT that I didn't even expect to be invited to the meetings. And that is why it is so great, and I'm so grateful to be on this program, because when I wrote the book, I was like into my state of mind as I lived that chapter of my life. And it was like, as the book was in production, in its last stages of production, I called my editor, my wonderful editor at Penguin, Ginny Yonsei, and I said, Ginny, we've got to do something here. This makes me look like, and she said, it's too late. And then she said, well, you'll talk about this when the book comes out, that you were completely a woman of you were constrained as a woman of your time. And that is absolutely the truth. I mean, the book is written with the limitations of my sensibility as they were in 1981. The women's movement was beginning. I was just starting, and I was treated, as not really a full citizen, even though I was a professor, and I was about to be really denied tenure before I was fired, before I was rehired at MIT for reasons that really were quite related to that. I was, no matter what I did, I was I was somehow relegated to cooking. I mean, it's all of the piece.
Well, for what it's worth, you're getting your revenge now, and you are getting your just notices now. The book is being extremely well received. I hate the fact that our time has whizzed by far too quickly here, but I do, in our remaining moments, want to ask you one more thing. We have all spent, and this is obviously right up your alley, we've spent much of the last 15 months of our lives not talking to actual people, but looking into those cameras there and looking at whatever green dots or
Yes.
whatever it is on our computers. And you know, I'm sure you have thought long and hard about what the long-term impacts of all of this are going to be on people who need to be with people but have only been with screens for the past year and change. What do you think?
Well, I think that, you know, I'm looking at a green dot so that people who are watching us will feel that I'm looking at them. And that's good because that's the point of television. But in terms of my ability to create an empathic connection with you, I need to be looking at you, which I am not. So there is no way that this experience is doing anything but creating the illusion of empathy without the demands of true connection. And I fear that people will forget this and will somehow settle for these illusions, for these, for these as if experiences, because they're friction free, because they come cheaper, because it's easier, we don't have to displace ourselves, for all the reasons of convenience. And and really accept this degradation of the kind of empathy and intimacy that we really need. During the pandemic, thank God for Zoom. I could teach, I could be with my students, but I looked at the green light because I wanted them to feel that I was looking at them, and I missed actually looking at them because that's what they really needed. And when it was time to have an office hour and really hear them, I did it by telephone and had a telephone call where I could listen fully to their voice and just be concentrating really on listening to them and getting kind of the full intimate sound of their voice and not be worrying about their background or just, what they were, if they were faking their background or if their eyes were wandering. We need to come back to the full embrace of the human, and we need to really concentrate on our need for each other. That's what I really think.
Amen. And I must confess,
Amen. Preach it.
I must
Other
confess
than
when
that,
I'm
Mrs.
not,
Lincoln, did you like the play?
I confess when I'm not on camera, I'm not looking at that green dot up there. I'm
Uh-huh.
looking at my screen so I can at
Yes.
least have some modicum of connection
Yes.
with you and actually see you. But of
Yes.
course, okay, like now I'm on camera and I got to look at the little dot there, and
Right.
we don't see each other at all. And I look
Yes.
forward to the day when maybe you can actually be in a studio and be 6 feet socially distanced away from me, and we can have a reasonable conversation and have that human connection once again.
I look forward to that so much. I think
Amen.
that's what we need. Amen.
The Empathy Diaries, a memoir certainly worth reading. Sherry Turkle, it's so good of you to join us from Provincetown, Massachusetts tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.